Hello, BookTube. I have a little mail for you today. A few periodicals to start off the week, and a couple of books, one of which I opened off camera, and one of which we'll open together. And the two periodicals are innocuous. You'd think I wouldn't be able to argue with them. But I can, and I will. With the first one, anyway. The first one is Smithsonian Magazine, which I recently resubscribed to. It's the official magazine of the Smithsonian Institution, where I've been a member forever and ever and ever. And it's mainly just overview cultural and historical articles, things that you wouldn't think I would be able to have much of an issue with. But I had issues with two things in here. The first one deals with the Gwich'in people in northeastern Alaska, who have a stretch of area, a stretch of territory there up near the Anwar that is the 1002. No, I don't imagine that many of you will be familiar with this area. I've tracked over every single inch of it. It's tundra. It's big flat land between the mountains and the Beaufort Sea, and it has, among many other things, many industrial concerns and whatnot. It also has an indigenous people. The Gwich'in people are indigenous people there. And this article is about their way of life and the fact that they prey on the enormous caribou herds. Porcupine caribou migrate through their territory. They calve in that territory, and then when the calves are old enough, they migrate away. And the Gwich'in people have, for hundreds of years, hunted those caribou and are worried that the influx of industrialization, specifically a pipeline, and larcenous presidencies, the Trump presidency literally auctioned off land right in their area. They're worried that will cut into their traditional way of life. And the article is very good, but it's also very sympathetic in a way that I naturally disapprove of, because the Gwich'in are called subsistence hunters, and that simply is not true. This is not the home of a subsistence hunter. And it's not just the caribou that they subsistence hunt. It's anything else that moves and lives and breathes in that area. Here is a young woman named Brittany holding a wolverine pelt. And we're told the animal's durable, moisture-wicking fur is prized for lining the hoods on winter parkers. There is no element of winter protection provided you by the skin of an animal who wanted to go on living that you've killed. For that purpose. There's no element of that skin that's better at protecting you from cold than the Gore-Tex that Brittany is already wearing and that she bought online like a normal person. The Gwich'in are not subsistence hunters, even the few hundred of them that still stick to this lifestyle. And that kind of comment in a magazine always drives me nuts. I know that it's supposed to sequester them under the umbrella of cultural inviolability, but the Gwich'in are not the wolves and bears that live in the 1002. They are human beings. They're connected to the rest of the world. They have to be. And as a result, it is not necessary for them to prey on caribou. And that bugs me, because those caribou aren't a resource. They're living beings. They want to go on living. And if we as humans, who have control over what we do and where we get our food, can take one more predator off their list, so much the better. It's a tempest in a teapot. I don't think the Gwich'in have long to have their traditional subsistence living in any case. But it bugged me. But it didn't bug me as much as the next thing. The next thing in the same issue. There's another article in here. Let me get you the title here. The title is Quest for Copper. Beautiful photography, as always, with Smithsonian Magazine. And the article is by Maddie Friedman. It talks about archaeology that's going on in Israel and the things that are being uncovered. And I thought, okay, well, this is dodgy territory, but I can trust Smithsonian since Smithsonian Magazine is published by the Smithsonian Institution. I can trust them to hew to a science-only line. There might be a bit of cultural relativism and waffling with talking about subsistence hunters in 2021. I'm naturally going to be a little bit skeptical if you show me pictures of an 18-year-old Gwich'in subsistence hunter who has the latest iPhone in his pocket. I'm not going to believe that he's a subsistence hunter, and subsistence hunting is a nice cloak for murdering animals when you don't need to. I naturally am going to twitch a little when that sort of stuff is lumped under cultural heritage, but I thought with an article about archaeology in the Holy Land, at least I would be on firm ground. But no, no, I am not, because they talked to an archaeologist named Nelson Gluck, Glueck, who I guess has been in the field for a long, long time. Probably the archaeologists on BookTube, Sean Standfast or Mark Richardson, would know his name and be familiar with his work. And at one point they give him a quote on exactly the subject that I was worried about. He says, "Those people are essentially of little faith who seek through archaeological corroboration of historical source materials in the Bible to validate its religious teachings and spiritual insights." Fantastic. I completely agree. I read that quote and breathed a huge sigh of relief, but unfortunately he wasn't done. The quote's not finished, and Smithsonian quotes the whole thing. The second part of his quote is, "As a matter of fact, however, it may be categorically stated that no archaeological discovery has ever controverted a biblical reference." So which is it, Seymour? Which is it? Is it wrong to go to the Bible for a completely accurate historical reference, or is it not? You can't have it both ways. And you don't get it both ways, because the second part of that statement is flagrantly wrong in the way that biblical apologists, which this person clearly is, no matter what the first part of his quote said, the way they get around it is to stretch the definition of corroboration till it's ridiculous, until it can account for anything. If the fact that you have archaeologically uncovered the fact that 4,000 years ago there were walls in Jericho, any kind of wall, if your archaeological investigation has proven to you that the inhabitants of Jericho 4,000 years ago built walls, which they certainly did, they were building them in Jericho 10,000 years ago, which certainly contradicts the rest of your Bible. But if you archaeological evidence says that the people of Jericho were building walls, even modest walls, and you find walls in an archaeological dig of Jericho, that does not corroborate the biblical story that says that the walls of Jericho were brought down by magical trumpets. And yet, I guarantee you this particular fraudulent archaeologist and any other biblical apologist will say that. They will say the fact that we found walls in this dig site means the story of the walls of Jericho, Joshua, the walls of Jericho, are true. They are corroborated. That is not the case. And we're not even talking about elastic issues like that. There are also flat contradictions to Bible claims. The Bible claims over and over again that certain cities will die forever. They're still alive. And they were certainly alive in archaeological times long after the claim was made that they would be dead. And so on and so forth. Right down the line. The Bible is not historically reliable in any way, except that occasionally it will name someone who did exist in history. It is not a documentary volume. And the fact that thousands and millions of people thought of it that way before there was science doesn't mean they were right. It just means they didn't have science. But you can't have both. So the first part of that statement is completely true. If you go to the Bible looking for its factual accuracy to shore up your faith in things unseen and realities unhoped for, then you are, what was the word? Essentially of little faith. I would agree with that completely. The second part, completely false. And the fact that Smithsonian would put it in here and not challenge it drove me nuts. Drove me nuts. The Smithsonian Institution underwrites archaeological digs. Am I to understand that the fine print in the underwriting of those archaeological digs all over the world is that the Bible has never been contradicted on matters of archaeology? It's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. Anyway. That was Smithsonian Magazine. Enjoyable. Believe it or not, I did enjoy it. I just didn't completely enjoy it, which can't be said for my next periodical. My next periodical I did completely enjoy, and that is this. This is the Bedford Times Press, a small newspaper in Bedford, Iowa, that I have shown you before. It has 2 sections and a full-color ad insert. But it's mostly a local newspaper. It's local sports teams, it's local police dealings, and local road and sign issues and whatnot. Except for one thing. There's one thing in the Bedford Times Press which is not local, and that is me. That is my ex libris column. one half of the first inside page. 3 columns where I write about whatever bookish thing happens to be on my mind. And I do that once a week. I write my column on the weekends. I am a weekly columnist for the Bedford Times Press. And the Bedford Times Press does not paywall, or they do. They paywall everything. So you would need to subscribe to the Bedford Times Press or the Lennox Timetable in order to get my column. Because, or you, one way or another, you need to subscribe to the print paper and get it in the mail. You need to pay whatever it is to pierce the paywall and read it online. And that puts the Bedford Times Press squarely in the middle of the things that of the old school print journals for which I write. On the one end of the scale, you have something like the Vineyard Gazette, the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, which is a great old newspaper, and I am their book reviewer. And they run my book reviews in the paper, but you've never heard me say that you should subscribe to the Vineyard Gazette. You can if you want to, but it is specifically a local paper. And not only that, but the book section editor of the Vineyard Gazette, a great guy, fantastic books editor, has decided to take one particular approach to running his section, which is that his book section will be local. Local authors, local books about the vineyard by vineyarders, books about the vineyard by non-vineyarders, books about the other subjects by people who live on the island, but otherwise no. Nothing else. Which is why I've never put out the drum beating call for the Vineyard Gazette. If you vacation on the vineyard or you have a house there, definitely, but you're going to read it anyway. If you're connected with the vineyard, you're going to read the Gazette anyway, but not otherwise, because the books that I am reviewing for the Vineyard Gazette are local interest. I don't review anything else. And once in a blue moon, some internationally known author will write a book on some other subject, some subject that has nothing to do with Martha's Vineyard, and I'll get to review it because they have a big house in Edgartown or wherever. But that's very, very rare. Usually it's a Martha's Vineyard book that I'm reviewing. When I understand that has limited interest. Then in the middle of the spectrum, you have something like the Bedford Times Press, which is a very local paper. Everything else that's in the paper is completely local to Taylor County, to Bedford, Iowa, and the surrounding towns, except my column. So that there is a call for me to say, you might want, it's a tiny amount of money, but you might want to subscribe to this print newspaper because it's not just once a month or once a year or once in a blue moon. It's every week. You'll be getting a 1,000-word column by me, and you can't get it any other way. And then all the way to the other end of the spectrum would be something like Big Canoe News in northern Georgia, which is a full-color newspaper that is beautiful to look at. Comes out once a month, big 60-page thing that'll show up on your doorstep, and it covers a lot of stuff. It also has a very strong local emphasis, but it covers a lot of stuff. And there, columns by me appear in every issue once a month. But on top of all that, I am also the book section editor for Big Canoe News. And they have made the wonderful decision, it's rare in this country, in this day and age, in the 21st century, for an old-style print newspaper to make this kind of a decision. But they made the wonderful decision to give books 2 full pages of coverage. Not the arts, not entertainment, but books alone. It's a full book section. 2 whole page spread in full color of books. Which means that your monthly subscription to Big Canoe News in northern Georgia will get you a lot of local northern Georgia news. It will get you a lot of Georgia news and maybe some American news. But it will also get you one of the best little book sections anywhere in the country. I say this without fear or favor. It's certainly the best book section. Books dedicated. Most papers anywhere in the country don't have a dedicated book section at all. And the ones that do, you can count them, first of all, on your fingers and toes. You won't need many digits to count the ones that do. And of the ones that do, my section for Big Canoe News is considerably better than any of them. It's not slipshod. It's not dumb. The pieces are extremely well done. They cover a wide variety because, unlike my Vineyard Gazette editor, my own philosophy of being a book section editor is that there's no such thing as a local reader. So I don't do that. I don't give my readers Georgia news and Georgia authors, unless a Georgia author happens to be writing a book that's of national interest. I want you to be able to use the Big Canoe book section when you go into any bookstore anywhere in the country. I want you to be able to read it even if you don't live in Georgia. My goal with the Big Canoe News is for it to get the national attention that it deserves. It's as simple as that. They do a much, much, much better job than their local newspaper remit makes necessary. They could probably win local awards doing half of what they do. Instead, they give it 110%. And the editor-in-chief there, she has very wonderfully given me a completely free hand. You can run your book section the way you want. And this is exactly the way I want. This is exactly the way I want. You give me 2 full pages. I'm going to give you a book section you're going to love to read every month. You're not going to feel like, well, if I don't live in Georgia, then it's not for me. So today's periodical falls right in the middle of that spectrum. I do strongly urge you to subscribe to the Bedford Times Press. I do. It's not that much money out of your pocket, and it will get you a weekly book column by me that's not small. You saw it's half of one whole page on whatever bookish subject happens to be on my mind. So I would urge you to do that. It would be a qualified urging, because I know what you're going to get, and I want you to know what you're going to get, which is a local newspaper, local 911 calls, local crop call stories, that sort of thing. And then stuck out in the middle of there is me. And believe you me, when I get the new issue of Big Canoe News, I will put the thumb throughs to you again that you should subscribe to both of these things. An old friend of mine told me years ago, he said, you're not actually asking these subscribers of yours to subscribe to all the periodicals where you get printed. I said, no, I'm not. But there's a small number of them where, yeah, it would be nice. And again, I want to point out, those of you who are old veterans of this channel will already know, if you decide to subscribe to the Vineyard Gazette or the Bedford Times Press or Smoke Signals or Big Canoe News in northern Georgia, if you decide to subscribe to these things because of me, feel free to let them know that. Okay? I think that I'm on pretty solid footing with all 3 of those venues. To use those 3 as examples, I think I'm on pretty solid footing with all 3 of those. It's not. I don't think I'm really all that dependent on a constant influx of thumbs up from the audience, but they never hurt. They never hurt. So feel free to do that. Those are the periodicals, and then we have the books. One is opened already, but I know it'll be of interest to quite a few of you. This is a new translation of The Owl and the Nightingale by Simon Armitage, a famous translator that I like most of what he does. And this is, I don't have any sheet for this, so I don't. Okay, here we go. The Owl and the Nightingale, one of the earliest literary works in Middle English, is a lively, anonymous comic poem about 2 birds who embark on a war of words in the wood, with a nearby poet reporting their arguments in rhyming couplets, line by line and blow by blow. In this engaging and energetic verse translation, Simon Armitage captures the verve and humor of this dramatic tale with all the cut and thrust of the original. I don't know how he's going to do that. Because The Owl and the Nightingale, in addition to being very interesting, very, very a good deal of fun once you're clued in to some of the historical details, I'm sure that the footnotes here will give that. I can't remember the last time I saw a standalone edition of The Owl and the Nightingale, so I imagine a lot of this will be footnotes and critical apparatus. But in addition to all that, it's strange. It's a very strange poem. I'll be interested to see. Simon Armitage is a kind of he's a very good translator, but he's a kind of button-down translator. I don't know how he'll do this. But I wanted you to know about it. This comes out in April. This comes out in April. 2 birds arguing and name-dropping. They name-drop throughout. They name-drop the name of someone that I think is clearly the poet, who's just inserting himself into the work. I wonder where Armitage will come down on that whole subject. We shall see. And then the package. We'll open this package and we'll be done. Okay, this is a finished copy. Comes out in early January. This is Bibliolepsy by Gina Apostol, which won the Philippine National Book Award. The People's Power Revolution and the impending fall of the Marcos regime isn't a distraction for extreme reader Preemie Peregrino, college student and narrator of the 2-time Philippine National Book Award pen and Open Book Award winner, Gina Apostol's delightful debut novel, published outside the Philippines for the first time. So this has won awards in the Philippines, major awards. This is the first time it's been published outside of the Philippines. And Preemie Peregrino, the main character, is what's called an extreme reader. I like that. I don't remember that from the last time we saw this. Preemie, partially in reaction to familial tragedies, and has built a psychosexual philosophy out of reading, a condition she calls bibliolepsy. This isn't the curl up with a good book brand of fetish, but rather a find and seduce the author kind of thing. How does Preemie define bibliolepsy? She defines it this way: a mawkishness derived from habitual aloneness and congenital desire. It manifests itself in a quickening between the thighs and the points of the breast, a broad aching V when addressed by writers, books, by bibliographies, dictionaries, Xerox machines, a sympathy for typists of manuscripts. A revolution may be in full swing, and the fall of the Marcos regime in the Philippines seemed not just possible but inevitable. But Preemie doesn't necessarily want to join the movement, as it all looks like a distraction from reading. Okay, so this comes out on January 4th in America. America finally gets to see what all the fuss is about. And we've seen this before. We saw the advanced copy. Now I have the finished copy. That's going to happen a lot. We're going to start to get finished copies of January stuff. But one way or another, this video has gone on 10 minutes longer than I thought was possible. So there we have the books. The Island the Nightingale is going to get a new translation by a storied translator. And Bibliolepsy is getting its first publication outside of the Philippines. Plus an irritating issue of Smithsonian and a delightful, as always, issue of the Bedford Times Press. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.